so Charlie Kirk was in the middle of that. And I thought that was something worth looking into, because I think a lot of Americans feel that kind of pressure.
Just going back to those messages, and I agree with most of what you said, actually everything that you said, to be honest. Just one thing he says at the end, leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. Now, when I saw those messages and I looked at it again today, and I said to my team, I'm like, why would you leave a cause as well if you're getting pressure? So my question to you is, what does that say about his stance? Because if you genuinely stand for something, people pressuring you one way or another shouldn't move, because Charlie talks about what he really believes in. He's very genuine when he talks at those campuses. So I was very surprised for him to even say the sentence, leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. If you really believe in a certain cause, you would leave it only if your beliefs have changed based on the facts, or at least your perception of the facts, your understanding of the facts, not because Jewish donors are pressuring you one way or another. Do you know where I'm coming from? And I'd love to get your trying to analyze what he meant by that, especially considering you face so much pressure from certain lobbying groups.
Well, I will say this. Charlie Kirk started Turning Point USA when he was extremely young. And I actually see some parallels between myself and what he has experienced or had experienced in his career, because we both got a very early start in our careers before we really knew who we were, right? And so when I look back at 20-year-old Anna, that's a very different person from who I am today. You grow, you mature, you become a little more open-minded if you're actually an intellectually curious person. I think with Charlie Kirk, because of his evangelical religion and the so-called Judeo-Christian values that are kind of drilled into the heads of evangelical Christians, he thought he believed one way. This is the way I read it, by the way. This is my speculation. I don't know for sure. But I'm guessing that because of what has transpired in Gaza and honestly the Middle East overall over the last 2 years, if you are rooted in reality and you're paying attention to what's really going on and you're absorbing accurate information, how could you not question Israel, the reality of the United States and its alliance with Israel, whether or not that alliance is really beneficial to the American people? Of course, you're going to start asking those questions, especially if you are one of these Trump supporters who sincerely believes in this "Make America Great Again, America First" ideology. And so when you see the tension between that ideology and the U.S. alliance with Israel, if you're an honest person, you're going to start questioning it. And I think that's what was going on with him. And so I can totally see him as someone who legitimately, sincerely supported Israel, and then found himself really questioning that support over the last 2 years because of everything that's been going down.
Yeah. And I think one thing that you or Tucker said in that interview that you guys had was that, it's very admirable when someone could change their stance. It's not easy to do so. And I think that's something that people should respect. If someone changes their stance, that takes courage because you're sticking with facts, or at least new facts that are coming about. You did hint that you could relate to the pressure that Charlie was facing. Again, you're very vocal about what Israel's doing in Gaza and beyond, and have been even before October 7th. What type of pressure have you faced, especially more recently?
Well, a very organized and orchestrated attempt to get me banished from the various, platforms I appear on, either for interviews or panel discussions or debates. And when they realize that that's not going to happen, right? I mean, the thing that gives me confidence is I made a very conscious decision to not be wealthy and continue working at the Young Turks. And the reason why I made that decision is because I have the confidence that I'm working for a company, an employer that is going to have my back regardless of what my opinions are. So to me, that is worth like my weight in gold. Okay, it's like the most important thing in the world to be able to have that kind of editorial freedom. Once they realized they can't really hit me where it hurts, which is financially, they started looking up family members of mine who have never uttered a single word about Israel publicly, who don't really pay attention to what's going on because they have busy lives and they're just trying to make ends meet. They're targeting those individuals. They're contacting their employers and attempting to get them fired from their jobs simply for being associated with me, simply for being family members of mine. That's the kind of people we're talking about here. So the intimidation tactic.
Who's they, Anna?
It's a group. Well, one of them, by the way, is running for a congressional seat in California. And if I were him, I would be a little careful, because once my ire is directed toward you and my Oppo research is directed toward you, you should be a little bit concerned. Okay. I haven't drawn any attention to him, but he's a congressional candidate in California, along with a group of people. I don't know if they're private citizens or if they have other, public facing jobs, but a group of people who have been, showing up at the place of employment for my family members, including my husband, pressuring the employers to fire my family members, that kind of stuff. It's really disgusting stuff. I'll give you another example. One of them is Canary Mission. Canary Mission is definitely part of this orchestrated, tactic to basically shut me up. At the end of the day, that's what they want. It's not just that they want to bankrupt you or ruin your life financially. They want to get you to shut up. And I think I'm a pretty effective communicator when it comes to this issue. I care about it deeply and I'm pretty informed on it. And then by censoring me and intimidating me, if it works, it's going to send a message to everyone else. If you want to keep your livelihood, do not in any way be critical of the genocidal campaign that Israel is deploying in the Gaza Strip right now.
Just explain to the audience, because there's some that are on one extreme, Israel or even Jews control the world. Obviously, it's an extreme that I don't believe in. I'm sure you don't believe in as well. On another extreme that, hey, no, Israel is a US ally. It's beneficial to the US. By the way, I'm not even American. I'm Australian, and I feel bad for the US of how much aid is going to Israel. I found out recently that Israel has universal healthcare. Obviously, the US doesn't. It's just heartbreaking to see that. And, I retweeted Marjorie Taylor Greene's tweet. You saw when she put a lot of US flags. Because, countries like ours, Australia, we look at the US as like the last bastion of democracy. So we look up to the US. And then just to see the country get dragged into the Middle East, get dragged into Ukraine, obviously separate to Israel, and face what is facing now, the polarization that is facing even within MAGA, it is heartbreaking. But can you explain to the audience, people just are not down that conspiracy path, conspiracy rabbit hole, but also not listening to the media and believing everything it says, is how does AIPAC work? How do these lobbying groups actually work? I've listened to Matt Gaetz tell his stories, which are pretty crazy to me, of his visits to Israel that were funded by AIPAC for him and other politicians, having QR codes where donors would scan the QR code. Do you see that? They scan a QR code for a US policymaker and decide who to give money to.
Yeah.
It just hurts to hear this. Explain to the audience how that works.
I think, first of all, thank you for this question, because I think it's really the most important question in this entire dialogue, because I don't want people to conflate the nation state of Israel and its government with the Jewish people. Okay, so let me just back up a little bit, because I want to kind of share what my values are. I recently shared this story on the Young Turks, but I think it was during a members only bonus episode. So let me share it with a broader audience. I come from a people that have been genocided. Okay, so I'm Armenian, and a lot of people ask me, how could you possibly, not a lot of people, but some Armenians, not all, but some Armenians have asked me, how could you possibly work for a Turk? And, that's after I explain what the name of the show means, because at first they'll come at me with like, I can't believe you work for a show named The Young Turks. I explain what the name of the show actually means. And then they immediately move on to, yeah, but you work for a Turk. Okay. When I was in 5th grade, obviously I grew up at that point hearing stories about what happened to my ancestors and the Armenian people in the Armenian genocide. And so living in Los Angeles, I had never encountered a Turkish person until I was in 5th grade. And this foreign exchange student named Tanya, or maybe she was a new immigrant, I don't remember exactly, but she barely spoke any English and she came from Turkey. And I was vicious to her. I bullied her like crazy. I don't remember all the things I did to her, but I was just mean. I said mean things to her. I said that, she killed the Armenians, like just not crazy stuff. And so that directed other students to bully her. It was horrible. I was in 5th grade, take it easy on me, but I feel horrible about it even today. I get called into the principal's office. Obviously, my parents get called. And I have old school parents, especially my mom, very old school. We go home and she whoops the hell out of me. Okay. And she's like, you don't do that. I was like, why, mom? Turks did this and that to the Armenians. Like, we need our revenge. We need to fight back. You know what my parents told me? And it stayed with me till this day. She said, you are not to hate Turkish people. You are not to blame individual Turks for what happened in 1915. It was the Turkish government. It was, the current Turkish government, which refuses to acknowledge the Armenian genocide. You can blame them, but you have to judge people as individuals. And I'm so happy I learned that lesson in a formative year of my life, because I don't at all associate what the government of Israel is doing with the Jewish people overall. And I mean, I have people who are incredibly close to me who are Jewish, who are vocally against what Israel is doing. And I think that intentional conflation is leading to the type of anti-Semitic garbage that we might be seeing online, and so please don't make that mistake. Now, aside from that, the reason why the United States does anything and everything the Israeli government wants, including, funding them to the tunes of hundreds of billions of dollars, bribing their neighboring countries to play nice with them. That costs a lot of money too. The reason why we give them 2,000-pound bombs to drop on the heads of little children in Gaza is because of the Israel lobby, which is tremendously powerful. But I think it goes further than that. I think that, the Zionists are well organized, and their intimidation tactics certainly work with some people. They can totally destroy your political career if they choose to focus their ire on you. And I do believe that Jeffrey Epstein was running a blackmail operation and had ties to Mossad. I don't think he was a Mossad agent. I do think he was being used as a Mossad asset. That's what I think.
First, isn't it crazy that you even have to put that disclaimer? You have to say, hey, I'm not, it's like imagine someone criticizing Iran and, but they're like, hey, but we're not, no one says that. We're not criticizing Shia Islam. We're just criticizing Iran. They don't have to add that disclaimer. But for Israel, even in the months following October 7th, there was that fear. It was one of the hardest topics for me to cover on my account. There was that fear whenever someone criticizes Israel, they link it to criticizing the Jewish religion. And for me to see also Ted Cruz kind of use that strategy on Tucker Carlson in that interview, people of that caliber, people that were friends at one stage, probably still friends maybe, was just mind-boggling. But then when I started reading into it, do you think that was an intentional strategy used by certain?
Yes.
Okay, it wasn't. It was part of their strategy.
Yes. The reason why we find ourselves having to draw these clear distinctions over and over again is because there was an intentional conflation of the government of Israel with the Jewish people overall. And so criticizing, they do that on purpose. So if you criticize the Israeli government, they can automatically call you an anti-Semite, even though you have no hatred in your heart at all for Jewish people, at all. I had never once been called an anti-Semite in my life until recently because of how vocally critical I am of the Israeli government. And how could you not be? Can you imagine if Russia were carrying out the exact same atrocities that the Israeli government is carrying out right now? Seriously, ask yourself that question, because those atrocities would be cited by our federal government day in, day out to essentially drum up more support to get even more involved with what's going on in Ukraine. But it's really interesting. We have high standards for every other world power. But when it comes to Israel, they get to do whatever they want. And if you criticize them, you're an anti-Semite. And what's so sick about this, Mario, is that there are anti-Semites out there. There are hateful, terrible people out there. And when you start calling people who aren't anti-Semites, or start accusing people who aren't of being anti-Semites, well, then that just makes you question whether actual anti-Semites really are what anti-Semites when they're called that.
It's like calling someone a Nazi. It's like you diminish what the Nazis, the horrific things they've actually done when you just throw these terms around. But then again, I'm a free speech absolutist. So if someone wants to call me, you, a Nazi, and anti